Eddie sounds like you there talking about the history of the belts. And so you guys, the old guard are holding on to this concept. The new kids who are coming in are going to say, oh, yeah, there's opportunities here with these guys on this side of the fence. To hell with those old belts. I'm going with them. That's what's going to happen. And I don't
No,
understand how
no,
anyone can see otherwise.
no, completely disagree. And look, I understand what you're getting at, and a new shiny new toy which sort of promises loads of money and fortunes. I can understand why that is appealing, but again, history means something in this sport. Boxing's been going since the 17th century, where it was once bare knuckle, even though that has come back again. I think people care about that. I think people care about the WBC because of the belt holders. I think people care about the WBA being over 100 years old. I think people care about
You
the
think they care
IBF.
about that more than money?
No, I
Prize
think you know what
fighters.
it is. No, you are correct. But the prize was always a belt meant money. And that's not always been the case, but sometimes winning a world title meant the fortune and the riches were coming. And they were kind of intertwined, those two things. So I think trying to separate the two is wrong. I think if you do become champion, most times you are promised a big check. And I think one goes hand in hand. So when fighters that were young said they wanted to become world champions, they didn't just mean they wanted to become world champions. They meant they wanted to settle or secure their future by becoming a world champion and thus getting money. So I don't think we should try and separate the two. Be a world champion and get money. And I think that's what boxing's been about for years.
If the guy who is paying the biggest purses says, to hell with those belts, come here and I'll pay you double, triple, they're going to laugh in the
Then
faces of those belts. Those
maybe,
belts don't stand a chance. This idea,
maybe.
history to kids who are, what does that mean? It's like, it's like saying to someone, oh yeah, you should dream of being on linear television. You should dream of being on, regular cable TV and not on YouTube because there's history.
No,
No, the times
but every
change.
sport,
Things
but
evolve.
every single sport, times do change. But the dream of every sports person, or I'd like to think the dream, and you speak to sports people every day, is to become a world champion or at least a champion in your field. It isn't necessarily about the money. That's not always the grab. And look,
Oh,
ultimately
for
you
these
have to
guys,
get
come
paid.
on.
No, ultimately you have to get paid. Don't get me wrong. Look, it's the most dangerous sport in the world. Get paid, but there's still, I think, fighters still harbor the dream of becoming a world champion. I still think that means something to fighters. And in today's age, maybe not as much as it once did. Because when you hear people like Mike Tyson say those belts were only there collecting dust, I can kind of understand how some people have changed their thinking. But I still think people want to become a world champion. I still believe it exists. And look, could it fade off eventually? Yes. But I speak to fighters nearly every day. Obviously, I'm at boxing events every single weekend, and I ask that question. Every fighter dreams of becoming a world champion. It's still something there. It still means a lot.
Well,
And I think that's not going to fade away anytime soon.
we had the very outspoken Lou DiBella on the program today, on my
Yeah.
program earlier in the day. He had, I mean, it was 1 hour of fire, but want to play you this clip and get your reaction. Lou, very much in agreement with Dana and Turkey that boxing is broken. He does not hide those feelings and those thoughts, and he is quite bullish on what is to come, and he is quite bullish on what is going to become of the promoters who once called him a middleman. He now believes they are in the same spot. Take a listen.
This was inevitable, right? And frankly, and Turkey making the four major guys all his little peons, it made this much more doable. And now you have a company capitalized on the stock exchange to 26, 27 million, depending on how you measure it.
Right.
With UFC alone, capitalized 11 billion, 26, 27 billion, 11 billion, and economically supported by the deepest pockets in the world. I mean, they're pretty much well set up for this.
Yeah, he was spitting fire, and I have to say, once again, it's prize fighting. The public doesn't care who the IBF champion is. The boxers, the ones coming up, don't care. They're going to go where the biggest purses are. And I think everyone who is singing this tune about the history of the belts are going to find out very quickly that it wasn't about the belts. It was just about the purses. And if a WBC belt happens to bring you the biggest purse, great. But if these guys are now doing it, give me the ring championship, the TKO belt. I'll be happy with that. That's what they're all going to say. I have no doubt of that. Just look at what Canelo Alvarez he doesn't care. He honestly doesn't care. He's a businessman. Payday.
No. He doesn't care now. And look, this is, I think, the point I'm trying to get at. I think fighters, I think we mentioned Shakur Stevenson a few times just because he almost seems to be like the perfect person for them, right? The age just makes sense, the kind of the eyeballs they're trying to attract makes sense. And I do wonder if you've already become a world champion, and Shakur, for example, is a free weight world champion, then do you care necessarily about the belts? Maybe not. But I do think the fighters that are coming up that have never become world champions, I think they care about the belts. So you're right, Canelo doesn't care about a belt anymore. Not at all. Bivol, Usyk, Fury, AJ, they've won belts. But it's the ones coming up that haven't won, I think they still care. But yeah, the other ones, I mean, people have thrown belts away in the past. People have vacated belts. I mean, Canelo basically threw away his IBF. He's only doing it now just because obviously that's the fight that's been put in front of him. So I think the experienced pros don't, but I do think the younger ones do. I want to quickly just focus on sort of the boxing's broken narrative that's kind of been spun in the last week or so. I will say that boxing certainly isn't broken now. I mean, it's fractured still, but it isn't broken. I think a year and a half before Turkey entered the scene, it was certainly broken. I do think it's more broken in America than maybe across Europe. I mean, once HBO decided to kind of not play a part in it and Showtime decided to kind of say, okay, enough's enough, and we wait to see what ESPN are going to do with Top Rank, you can kind of understand why people say boxing is broken in America. I think across Europe, it's thriving. I mean, there are stadium shows, arenas are packed. As you know, boxing's spoken about here on radio stations every single day. It's still doing the back pages and the front pages. I think in America, it seems to have dropped down from where it once was. I think boxing's broken in America, but not necessarily around the world.
Couldn't agree more. And I actually said that to Lou earlier today. He was focused very much on America. And in his defense, Dana White last week was speaking about America, saying that we need to build it here and then expand. But yes, 100%. It's a totally different story. You talk about the most popular fighters in the world. They're way more popular overseas than they are here. Yeah. And so there are issues. I don't even agree. By the way, I would be a massive hypocrite if I sit here and say that boxing is quote unquote broken, because just a few weeks ago I was saying it's never been more fun to cover boxing. Yeah. And so part of the fun of covering boxing is how crazy and wacky it all is. But boxing isn't broken. Boxing is boxing. You know what I mean? It's the same sort of structure as the last 20, 30, even 40 years. It was a little bit more consolidated in the 70s and 80s, and there were less champions. And when someone like Lou says, we did this to ourselves, he's right. We've got an interim super welterweight champion coming up, and we've got, the gold super lightweight champion and all these different intercontinental and all this stuff. It makes it very hard to follow the sport. So the idea of streamlining things, less belts, less weight classes, less divisions, I think is going to prove to be very successful for them. So yes, there are things that need to evolve and change. Yeah, no, you don't think that that's a good move. I mean, obviously, you might be limiting yourself if you do that, and you have to be very strategic. You might be, leaving some weight classes behind. But it sounds to me like they're going to try and recreate the model of when they sort of relaunched the UFC. They whittled things down. They got rid of weight classes. They built up the main ones that they believed were the main ones, and then they started to reintroduce the newer ones, the lighter ones.
This new weight class, obviously, look, boxing started, if you like, with 8 weight classes. And then now I think there's 18 if you count Bridgerweight, which a lot of the governing bodies don't, but it's there. It's a weight class. My issue with that is, okay, let's just throw, for example, TKO's potential first event, right? Canelo versus Crawford, 168-pound fight. That wasn't a weight class that existed. That's one of the new weight classes. Are we going to get rid of that? Are we going to get rid of the cruiserweight division, which I think's proved to be one of the best divisions in boxing in recent years? I mean, Alexander Usyk came from that. Jaya Pataia, I think, is going to be a pound for pounder. So I think we've got to be careful with which weight classes we get rid of. Are we going to look to cut the smaller guys, kind of like what the UFC did? Yet the smaller guys in recent years have provided some fantastic boxing for us. Inoue's come from that weight class. Jesse Bam Rodriguez has come from the lower weight classes. Chocolatito, Estrada. I can go on and on and on. So I think we've got to be careful in which weight classes we remove. If we keep to the standard 8 that we started with, not all the best stars are there at the moment. So it's interesting. It's intriguing. Again, we're only getting little snippets from Dana and other people. So this is all still a puzzle we're trying to put together. But I'm not sure about the weight classes thing. I think that we've got to be careful with what we do there, because some fighters are just literally stuck and strict in a weight. And it's a weight that's been there for the past 40, 50 years. So I don't know.